Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected President of the Institute, Chairman, Seminar and Conference Committee, past Presidents, respected panelists of today's panel discussion session, members of the Institute, guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of ICMAB, I welcome you all to this discussion session on a subject of profound importance. Now I would request and invite Mr. Muhammad Salim, FCMA, Honorable President of the Institute.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you and good evening. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you to the ICMAB panel discussion on corporate governance, the role of independent directors. I welcome our fellow and associate member for their participation. I welcome other dignitary participants from different enterprises of the country. I also want to thank everyone on this staff who has worked to make this event successful. We are here today to discuss the increasingly important role that independent directors play in protecting the stakeholders of the company and how their effectiveness can be enhanced. These issues are not academic. I expect that this panel discussion will help shape our agenda on issues facing independent directors today. Today, we have some eminent personalities in the country who are expert on this issue, like Mr. Arif Khan, FCMA Commissioner, Bangladesh Securities Exchange Commission, Mr. M. Motin Chaudhary, Managing Director, Malek Spinning Mills Limited, Mr. Mamunur Rashid, Vice Chairman, BD Venture, Mr. M. Mohiuddin, FCMA, past President of ICMAB and Member, Chittagong Stock Exchange, Professor Dr. Muhammad Osman Imam, FCMA, Professor, Department of Finance, Dhaka University, Mr. Muzaffar Ahmed, FCMA, past President and Chairman, Seminar and Conference Committee, ICMAB. As a professional body, we are also committed to continuous improvement through introducing new syllabus, organizing continual professional development program, need-based training programs to the members and the students to adjust with the changing environment of the business. Now the CMS play a pivotal role on the top management of different organizations. Today, alongside the manufacturing and service industries, the banking and financial institutions, being the prime mover of the economic activities, are also treated as industries, where CMS are also contributing significantly through sharpened knowledge and through leadership. I think to meet such needs of the time, CMS are there, and for good governance of the enterprises as well as for their successful long-term survival, the importance of the service of CMS cannot be exaggerated. I do believe that this panel discussion and interactions of knowledge will go in a long way, and everybody will be benefited to ensure the accountability and transparency of the enterprise through good governance, where independent directors will play important role. Thanking you for your patient hearing. I wish the program a great success. Allah Hafiz.
I would request very humbly Mr. Muzaffar Ahmed, FCMA, past President of the Institute and presently Chairman of the Seminar and Conference Committee, their participants, Mr. Muzaffar Ahmed.
Respected President of the Institute, a galaxy of professionals, along with the very vibrant and very known personalities as discussion session on this very, very vital, important subject, corporate governance, and especially the role of the independent directors. Once, say in 2006-07, we are organizing workshops on corporate governance, mainly to discuss on the theoretical aspects, particularly based on the OECD principles. But today, we are going to discuss on something which has happened. The regulators has taken some action, and we are here to now review what is the action and reaction of this corporate governance circular. Initially, the Securities and Exchange Commission wanted this circular as comply or explain. But later on, after 1 or 2 years, it has confirmed that now you will have to maintain it. You will have to go ahead with this thing on compulsory basis. Therefore, it has gone a long way now. 3 to 4 years already have 3 years already happened. So we are now here to review this subject of corporate governance, especially the role of the independent directors. As our president said, we have few personalities who are directly, indirectly related with this corporate governance and doing research, applying, or looking from a holistic approach from different perspective. So we have with us, first of all, I will invite Mr. Arif Khan, Commissioner of Bangladesh Securities and Exchange Commission, to calmly take his seat on the dais. He has, in addition to his degree as a fellow member of this institute, MBA from Dhaka University, he has got the rare qualification to be the certified financial analyst from ISWIS, which is a rare qualification. Hardly there are few people in this country. So we are very proud to have with us Arif Khan, and let us give him a big hand. Now, I would introduce you a very shy man who doesn't like to come forward to show him what he is. He is Major Retired Abdul Motin Chowdhury. Motin bhai, I would request you to kindly come to the dais. And Mr. Motin is such a personality who likes to, even today, having so many resources, having a business of Rohim Textile, Malik Spinning, Neat Asia, Titash Spinning and Denims, and few other companies he has got, he's owning and managing it. That even then, if you see his car, he is using a Toyota, and he advised me, because this is his maximum requirement, not more than that. Another personality with us today, although he is chairman of BD Venture, but I know him indifferently, Mr. Mamunur Rashid. I request Mr. Mamunur Rashid to kindly come to the dais. So, he's one side he's an economist, he's a banker, and now a researcher, and now started another venture. It's called BD Venture, the first venture capital company in this country. So I wish Mamun Bhai will be very successful in this thing. So let us give a big hand to Mamun. Then I do not like to introduce, or I don't have the courage to introduce Mr. Mohiuddin, FCMA, a past president of this institute. Mohiuddin Bhai, I would request you to kindly to come to the dais. We feel very proud to have Mr. Mohiuddin with us, and he is our fellow member. Thank you, Mohiuddin Bhai, to accept our invitation. Let us give a big hand to Mr. Mohiuddin. And we have another vibrant, very young professor, very talented professor of Dhaka University Department of Finance, Dr. Usman Imam. Usman, would you come here? Usman, when we are discussing about this corporate governance, long before, then he took the initiative to have a as Center for Corporate Governance in the Dhaka University, and he is now heading that center. So the time, devotion, and research he has given in this subject is of utmost importance to us. So on the research side, I could not find anybody other than Dr. Usman Imam to come here with us. So thank you, Dr. Usman, to come here, Professor Usman, to have us. Let us have a good hand.
Thank you very much for giving me floor, and I really welcome all the participants here to discuss a very pertinent issue. To answer your questions, I have to go back a little bit. You know that Bangladesh capital market has been growing in the last couple of years. Our market capitalization is now around 30 billion US dollar. It's around 22% of our GDP. 10 years back, our market cap was less than $5 billion. But this growth has not come without any price. We have seen that in 1996, there was a stock market bubble and bust cycle. We have also seen another heavier, I would say very severe correction which took place in 2010 when the index went up to 9,000 and now it's moving around 4,500. So it's almost 50% of its peak, and that actually created a lot of hue and cry and discussion into the society. And we were having a lot of reform programs in the last 3 years. Whenever we met any foreign institutional investors or they came to us or we went to them, they were always asking one very basic question. Couple of questions they were asking. One of the questions was what is the corporate governance standard of the listed companies in this country? Like another question they always ask, what is the quality of accounting and auditing work of this country? So these two questions we always faced. And the earlier chairman of ACC, Mr. Farooq Ahmed Siddiqui, Mr. Mirza Azizul Islam, in 2006 came up with the first guideline on corporate governance, aiming to improve the governance of the stock listed companies a bit better. But as you mentioned it very clearly that at that point in time it was not mandatory. It was either comply or explain. If you cannot comply, explain what are the reasons that you cannot comply. Then we, the new board, new chairman, and we took over 2.5 years back, and we started to look into this issue. And this time in 2012, we came up with even more detailed corporate governance guideline. If you have any chance to look into this corporate governance guideline, this is available in Bangladesh SEC's website. And I'm sure the professionals who are working in different listed companies, CFOs or company secretaries, you are all aware of this. This is much, much broader, and this is a mandatory requirement. I just tell you, before answering his question, highlights of major items of this governance. For the first time, we have introduced that in any listed company, at least 20% of the board members should be independent directors who are not the promoter, sponsor, or having more than 1% shareholding. In India, for an example, the ratio is 33%. 1/3 of the board members should be independent directors. Not only that, in India, they say that if the chairman is an executive chairman, meaning chairman is working in the organization, then independent director ratio is 50%. So we didn't go into that stringent policy because in our country we don't have that much of resources, so not too many people for independent directors. So we went for 20% independent directors. We said that for the first time, CEO and CFO has to certify financial reports, and they have to verify that they have personally reviewed the financial statements, and they will give some reporting on that. We have, for the first time, we said that annual reports disclosure should be much more broader. I don't go into that detail, but if you look into recent annual reports of any listed companies this year, you will see much more disclosure requirement so that investors get more information. And finally, we also introduced that whether these corporate governance guidelines are being followed or implemented, that has to be checked by somebody else. So we introduced for the first time that corporate governance guidelines certification, whether it is implemented or not, will be audited by certain professionals. And we included for the first time chartered accountants, cost and management accountants, and chartered secretaries who are eligible for certification of these governance guidelines. And we also mentioned that this certification has to be published in the annual report so that there is no chance of you escape it. And that's how we came to this place. But a lot of discussion is taking place in the society. I will come later on. Whether we are happy or not, we are currently reviewing the status. And if you ask me generally, I would say that in 70% case there are compliances, but 30% case there are non-compliance. And in most of the non-compliance area are disclosure in the annual report are not yet up to the mark what we expected. In some cases, there are confusions of independent directors. And in some cases, we found that the independent directors are not playing proper role as truly independent. I think Mr. Mamun Rashid will be able to give you more answer on this issue. Mr. Motin Chaudhary is a very respectable person. He's coming from the listed companies side. He will be able to. There is a lot of debate. People say that where can we find so many people as independent director? Because we have got more than 200, 300 listed companies. And if you need those people, they have to really give time. And there are issues that how to select them. So we are kindly running now at experimental stage. But I must tell that a lot of discussion is taking place in the society, in the listed companies. I have attended a lot of courses in World Bank IFC-sponsored corporate governance program, and I see that they are also organizing another program in Westin Hotel next 14, 15, 16. So this is an important area where we can...
Thank you,
okay.
Mr. Commissioner. Now, I would turn back to the hot seat, Mr. Abdul Motin Chaudhary, who has got two publicly listed companies. One, Rohim Textile, quite long before. Now, in the last year or before it started, there is a Malak Spinning. So, I would now request you, how you have taken this circular in your company to select independent director, or what is the impact of this circular? What do you think?
Our business is basically a transitional business, because the whole business atmosphere environment started only 15 to 20 years ago. Because before that, there were very few 100 crore companies in Bangladesh. But in the last 15 years, there has been a huge growth. This growth has brought in a lot of irregularities, a lot of favoritism, etc., which needs to be corrected if we want to sustain and survive our businesses. And this is very important that we do that, because we have unequal competition in society today. We have different banks giving out different types of doles. And when they come in, they disturb the business. For example, you read about mostly the nationalized banks and other banks. So it must be very important that everything is structured and everything is regulated. And we have to come to a system where we finish the jungle business and come into real civilized business. So this corporate governance matter that has come up is something that is essential for us to do. We may have different opinions about it, but without this, we can't move forward. And because we are growing bigger, we are getting into public domain, we are taking money from people, we are taking money from banks, which are also public money. So unless we start becoming accountable in a very transparent manner, we cannot have growth. And if we don't have growth, then it is not good for any one of us. Now, how do we encourage this thing to happen more? First of all, I think independent directors is a very, very good idea. A very, very good idea. And I don't think we have shortage of numbers, because it allows even businessmen to sit on boards. I also sit on some boards as independent directors. So, you can correct cross-matching from companies, from teachers, from professionals, from your institution, from other institutions. So I really don't think we have shortage. It is just like we have to get used to talking and working with people who are not thinking in our same frequency. And that is probably the spirit of having an independent director, that he brings in a new dimension to the thinking of the company board and all to the company activities. So I feel that the independent director ratio as it is today is okay. I don't think we should make it bigger at this moment, because we have to get used to this. As I was just saying, it's a very transitional society. India has come through this for a long, long time. Their businesses, their companies have been more active. So current ratio is perfect, but we must get good people, and we must give them the freedom to work and help ourselves. And this is for the betterment of the business. Otherwise, we will not sustain.
Thank you, Motin Bhai. Wonderful. Now, I would turn to Mr. Mamun Rashid. You are in corporate house in the bank for quite a long time. Now, what is your experience on this independent director, and especially the Bangladesh Security Exchange Commission circular on independent directors and corporate governance?
Thank you. I would welcome SEC's circular, or rather refurbished and reviewed and revisited circular. The journey started from 2006, and where as the Bangladesh economy is getting integrated with the global economies, so the need for standardization, whether minimum possible standardization or the highest possible standardization, that can be debated. We being operating in a transition economy that Mr. very respected and highly esteemed Mr. Motin Chaudhary has just focused on, but disclosure, where do we stand, and does democracy or does transparency, does accountability, does clarity mean the same here in Bangladesh that is being meant in Singapore or Hong Kong or London or New York? Any global investor would try to look at that. Having said so, that yes, I put in a humble article on how independent are the independent directors, or how independent is the independent directors. There I have been myself is working with few institutions in the financial sector as independent director, and increasingly I am losing interest. Why? Because it is not worth my time. And I think it is, as of today, while I salute, I welcome, I respect the issuance of the reviewed circular from SEC that will ensure minimum possible success transfer and standardization for the listed companies and as a whole. And this will send a message to the entire corporate world how we want to behave, how we should be behaving. At the same time, the fee, the way independent directors are being selected, and these are showing a lot of compromises. And I am of the opinion, and if I am being allowed to be blunt, that other than the retired government servants or retired businessmen as such, or university teachers, professionals that I'm talking in a professional body now, it will be very hard to attract and keep them glued on to do what is being expected to be done from the independent directors under the present fee structure that we get to see. Having said so, many of my colleagues and many of my seniors in Singapore, Hong Kong, London, New York, Latin America, Middle East, they are working as the independent directors. Even in India, many of my teachers where I went to Northwestern University at Kellogg, that yes, I have seen that they are working for the Indian listed companies. The fee structure is much more encouraging than what we get to see here. This is number one. Number two, whether the independent directors are being allowed to work independently. And that can also be excused because, as Mr. Motin Chaudhary has mentioned, that this is a transitioning kind of situation. But we would be interested, and we should be interested to see how the independent directors are being selected, who are the people, whether they are being allowed to play their role, and more importantly, whether we are keeping them encouragingly engaged to ensure better success transfer.
Thank you, Mahmood Shah. Here, just as you are echoing with Arif, that initially when somebody coming from outside, the first question is how independent, how the corporate behavior of this board, and where role of independent directors is very important. So at the first step, I think that it has gone. And the other point you are raising, that how independent the independent directors are, here then we have got something to do. So I am turning to Mr. Mohiuddin. Mr. Mohiuddin is now the director of Stock Exchange, Chittagong Stock Exchange. Now, these stock exchanges are working as a quasi-regulators of the PLCs. Now, how do you feel about the role of independent directors in the board of listed companies now? Because they are submitting accounts and everything to you, you are reviewing it, and how you see this independent director's role?
Thank you. In fact, before giving the reply of your question, I would like to say a few words about how the board is composed of, other than independent directors. When you say family members, father, son, daughter, grandfather, father, sons, and daughter, that is unequal people have been asked to become a team to score the goal. And this is the fundamental flaws of the board in Bangladesh. Maybe it was so in other developing countries like us. On that perspective, if we ask how important or significant is the role of independent director? I think it's a very top question sitting in the board or looking from the stock exchange perspective, how the independent directors are performing. So what is the authority of board members? When anything placed in the board, they have the right to discuss, they have the right to inquire information, further clarification, not beyond that. If something is not included in the agenda, under the current system of the circular, independent director cannot ask for anything more.
Now,
but one thing we should appreciate that gradually things are improving. When SSC issued the circular in 2006, at that time it was said you have at least one independent director. If you don't have, please tell how soon you will have it. Now they make it two. And both the stock exchange is now composed of the board, majority is independent directors. So we are coming up. But when you come back to the performance area, you must know, or we must know, how these independent directors are being selected.
No,
although circular says that there is some restrictions regarding the selection of the independent directors, I would request the commissioner to verify, if possible, the selection of the independent directors.
Okay, how do you see this percentage, 20%? 20% to be independent director. Do you think that it is all right?
Percentage-wise, I think we should scale it gradually. If we go for more independent directors, acceptability is the most important. In our country, board, I don't know how effective are the board. Because how effective are the board? Because the very composition of the board is non-functional.
But
number
as
one.
an
Number
independent
two, we do not have any arrangement in the country as of now to train the directors. So when somebody becomes the listed company, I would request the commissioner to make some arrangement to train the board member how they would behave.
Now, coming to your point, the corporate governance, at least an independent director, he should follow the normal, if the normal rules are applied, say he is to receive a notice, say 10 days, 7 days before, agendas is to be circulated to all, and the directors, the independent director is to act on this, the circular given or the agenda given. So if it is given, at least something is he's getting on the agenda to be discussed in the board meeting.
No, he can have the right to discuss the agenda if it is placed in the board meeting. So once there was a time, there was no notice, there was no board meeting, but there was a resolution. At least this thing has stopped. Since there is an independent director, there should be notice, there should be an agenda, there should be a working paper. This thing is coming up, and it will grow over the time when competition will become more strict and the rule of the law is allowed to play.
Thank you, Mr. Mohit.
But one thing, the independent director should show that his presence is relevant for the consolidation of the organization business, or for growth, or for risk management. So it depends on the quality of the independent directors, what kind of independent directors in the board.
Okay, thank you. Now I am coming to Dr. Usman Imam. Usman, you are researching on this corporate governance for a quite long time, even before this SEC circular. Now, how do you see this circular? Is it as per the requirement, as you have seen the research, the circular, is it as per research, you think that this is the needed by the corporate houses, and the same fashion it has been given by the SSC? What is your opinion?
Okay. I'd like to share some of my research findings, as well as the first ever international conference hosted by our Center for Corporate Governance in 2005, which is prior to the February 2000 regulation, which is on comply or explain basis. And we have seen there on one of the leading houses from Samson Choudhury Square Group, and they come up with an idea that actually corporate governance is not indeed required to be fulfilled by an independent director. That was the first impression from a leading house, which had turned out to be one of the leading house, and they are coming in, especially Tapancho. They came in and debated. It's a really debated issue at the time. And there are some Indians, on the side who have already adopted, number of directors on their role. They argue that actually the presence of independent director in the board indeed has a merit for a good governance. Now the question is, that was in 2005, and when we see in 2006 regarding the circular that came in, and I have done immediately after a few months later extent of compliance over time. It was found, most of the cases they took time to get even comply on the issues, and some even didn't go for explaining the issues. Later on, we see there is an improvement over time. So they are getting used to it in a sense, because I think they started thinking that corporate governance, good governance in the organization lead to good performance. That is one of the things. Now, even with the research, I will like to say a few things. We have seen earlier that is the disqualification of the independent director has been mentioned. Now, over time, with this new, they have come up with the qualification as well. So, disqualification, who can't be independent director, now they come up who can be independent director. That is it. And the important things I've seen, the role of audit committee, where independent director, the chairman of the audit committee should be independent director, having some accounting literacy as far as concerned the way it is mentioned. And I see that I will rather say in Bangladesh, one of the research I'm quoting is a non-performing loan resolution evidence from Bangladesh, bank level evidence from Bangladesh. And we have seen regulation has an impact, corporate governance variables has an impact, but it still is more precise regulation played much more greater role for ensuring the good compliance rather than the corporate governance as it was in Bangladesh. And I will share later on, because I have been on the board in a primary regulator in a bank, in a non-bank, and also a fund manager for more than 10 years as a fund manager in capital market, where I represent outside director, fulfilling a role of independent director. And I will say there is much role to play out there, these institutions, as compared to manufacturing, where it's still the way independent director may be chosen, instead of independent, it is becoming, dependent on the directors or the boards, the way they like to choose. And in addition, I want to give my view with regard to the role of independent director, who may provide lip services unless they are required to be compensated clearly. Otherwise, you need to make them accountable. I will share some of the things later on, and that kind of definition, compensation be fixed by the board, not necessarily through the regulation. I'm not saying that one. Let the board be confident on how much to compensate, because the way they want to get them used for the betterment of the organization.
Okay, thank you, Isman. Now I'm coming to Arif Khan, that some of the things are now coming up from the circular itself, and where circular is also absent. I'm just 2 points I am noting from Dr. Usman Imam's discussion. There is a selection process. They have got a question how the selection given by the SEC in the regulation. The other thing, the circular itself is silent about the compensation of a professional who is rendering service, and what is his remuneration for these things. So, what is your opinion on these two things?
Okay. Regarding a selection process, our guideline clearly spells out that what are the criteria, what are the qualifications of a person who are eligible for to be seated in a board as an independent director. So very clearly spelled out clarification and qualifications there. And it is the role of the existing board of directors of a company who will select persons from society from professional group who satisfies or qualify those criteria. And then the board nominates him, adopt him as an independent director in the board, which later on adopted in the AGM. So that's the normal process, and that's the process around the globe. It's not that regulator will approve this independent director. In certain cases, there are cases, but I heard that there are very significant questions are being raised by especially minority shareholders who are not controlling in the board. They're telling that maybe the independent directors are the friend of the owners. Maybe they're a very close person with the owners. Maybe they are serving their purpose only. So how can you stop this? This is a huge debate. I attended a Hong Kong Futures Commission meeting last month in Hong Kong, and they are discussing this same issue. It's not new in Bangladesh, but gradually it has improved there. In UK, recently there is a serious discussion that whether the independent directors should be elected by only minority shareholders, not promoter shareholders. So promoter shareholders may not have any voting right to select the independent directors. Only the people who are not majority, they will be voting for. So this is a subject which is being discussed in that level. But I think we will not go into that extent initially, as Mr. Motin said very correctly, that we are in transitional stage. We need to get first used to with this system, and then gradually, if you try to do too much thing at a time, then it breaks down. Like in India, we are also thinking possibility that what Model India follows, that they prepare a list of people who can be appointed as independent director. Regulator and Ministry of Finance, Commerce, they work together and they prepare, suppose, a 1,000 people's list in the database who will be eligible to be selected independent directors. So thereby they test at least basic criteria of those person, integrity and possibility. So that is a question that whether we will go in that model will take a couple of more time, and the issues are there. And regarding compensation, I think Mr. Mamun Rashid and Mr. Usman Imam raised very, very pertinent question. I went to London Stock Exchange and London FSA last year, and I found that in London, most of the bank's directors are personally interviewed by the central bank before appointing them a director. And not only that, it is being practiced that most of the bank's majority directors are actually independent directors. Shareholders do not sit in the board. They send their representatives in the board as an independent director. But those independent directors are heavily paid. It's like full-time job. And when you hire Mr. Mamun Rashid, Mr. Motin Chaudhary, Mr. Osman Imam, Mr. Mohiddin as an independent, Mr. Muzaffar Ahmed, I think the contribution these people will give, sometimes owners do not understand. So this is just the beginning. I'm sure that this will happen. In every country in the globe, remuneration has increased significantly, because similar thing happens in Bangladesh in case of auditor selection. I have seen, and many of us experience the same scene in the AGM when we try to find out a better auditor with better credentials, and if you want to raise the fee to 50,000 taka only, even shareholders say no, 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 no. And I really wonder that these people will safeguard the shareholders' interest first. So this is a cultural issue. I'm sure that it will come later on, and we will encourage corporate bodies, if they increase proper remuneration for the independent directors, I'm sure it will work further. I just want to say one added point for you, that in the corporate governance guide, Mr. Mohiddin mentioned that proper training is required for the directors. We have also mentioned every listed company has to have a code for the board members, a policy. That is a mandatory requirement. So every organization will have a code of conduct for the board of directors, what they can do, what they cannot do. I'm sure once it is done, and there are some international organizations coming, we'll have a lot of training.
And next day I could set up an industry. But if I want to set Rahim Textile, I tried a couple of times. First of all, the shareholders will say, "Amra capital raise korbo na." Amar share malik spin Rahim Textile capital, by the way, is 1,82 লক্ষ টাকা দিয়ে শুরু হয়েছে। এখন ওই বোনাস শেয়ার দিয়ে 3 কোটির মতন আসছে। এই কোম্পানি ব্যাংকের সঙ্গে ব্যবসা করতে গেলে কোনো ব্যাংক তো ওকে লোন দিচ্ছে না, because his paid up capital is so low, and because he is public, the formalities that he has to go through now to raise the capital, I'm not spending that money, time and energy, so I'm investing my energy on another company. So let us look at how we want to regulate the business. Is regulation going to promote the business, or is regulation going to stop the business? In my case, regulation has stopped the business of Rahim Textile, whereas without regulation, Neat Asia, Rahim Malik Spinning, Salek Textile, which came 10 years after Rahim Textile, are now 10 times bigger than Rahim Textile. Every small thing you have to give a PSI. So, the formalities, and then when you send this, you are scrutinized. So, ekhon dekhen je this public thing, I am in support of total regulation, correct. But we are really looking at a very small percentage of the business of Bangladesh. We are leaving the entire other business to the jungle law, and we are trying to do this. So, এটা হলো number one প্রশ্ন যে আমরা কি করে সমন্বয় আনবো, সমন্বয় না আসলে তো ব্যবসাটা thrive করবে না. We must attract those people to come into public businesses. So how do we do that? If they don't come, then few of us going there and trying to talk big, it doesn't make sense, because I said the top companies, I named you 3, you might name me another 10. They're not at all coming into public, they're not in the public domain at all. Okay, there was a forced regulation that above 10 crore paid up capital, you have to go public. So what do? We promote another company. Instead of raising this company, we promote another company, and then we have another 10 crore. আরেকটা করে দেওয়া হচ্ছে বাংলাদেশে যে কোম্পানি ওয়াইজ বিজনেসকে লিমিট করে দেওয়া। যেমন আপনার ইডিএফ ফ্যাসিলিটি বলছে যে একটা কোম্পানি $12 million উপরে যেতে পারবে না। Now how can you grow big? Because your requirement is more than $12 million. So what do? You set up another company. And this is a very bad practice, because now we are having a lot of companies coming up, and everybody is doing irregular things in one company. But if you have one big company, your Bangladesh Bank CIB will be on one company, and it will be very difficult for you to move around and be irregular. প্রশ্নটা জানি কি ছিল?
ওটাই আমি আপনার I want to know what is your reaction on this selection of independent directors?
Selection of independent directors, I think, as I said, আমি বারে বলছি যে আসল ব্যবসা তো অন্য জায়গায়। এইটুক ব্যবসা নিয়ে আপনার আস্তে ধীরে নামি আমরা। এখন যে সিলেকশন প্রসেসটা আছে, let's work on it, let's develop upon it. Now, in a small company, if we are talking about getting an independent director and paying him another salary, that's another head count, there's another expense. How much of that would one like to absorb, would one like to be able to absorb? So, এটাও একটা প্রশ্ন আসে যে কিভাবে। I think the selection process that we have now, where we have made a criteria of who can become and who cannot become, for the time being, I think let's limit to this. But ekhane we might use our good offices of saying if somebody is chosen who doesn't look too good, shekhane. Second point is accessing to the company. I mean, now by regulation, the independent directors have to be in certain committees. So apart from the board meeting, they also have access, like the audit committee, as he said, has to be headed by an independent director. So he is having access to the accounts, and I think at this stage of businesses, this is a good enough exposure. We can have more exposure as time goes on. Like the London Stock Exchange has evolved over 200 years. India has evolved 100 years. We are looking at a 15-year history only, if we want to take it into consideration. So, আমি মনে করি যে প্রেশারটা থাকা উচিত যে আরো বাড়ানো, বাট আবার প্র্যাকটিক্যালি আমাদের একটা ব্যালেন্সিং করতে পারলে বোধহয় ভালো হবে। আদারওয়াইজ উই আর শাইং পিপল অ্যাওয়ে ফ্রম কামিং ইন। আমাদের অবজেক্টিভ তো এই না যে 5% অফ দ্য বিজনেসকে নিয়ে রেগুলেট করে 95%কে ছেড়ে দিব। আমরা চাচ্ছি যে 95% এদিকে আসুক। সো এইখানে আমরা কিভাবে আনবো? কম্পোজিশন অফ দ্য বোর্ড, একটা কোম্পানি যদি শুরু হয়, জেনারেলি 2 friends or 2 brothers or 2 sisters start a company. So the first boards will always be these people. You have to wait for the next generation to come when you want variety of people, because one brother will sell his share and outsider will come in, non-family. So that if you don't wait, you will spoil the business, because business যে momentumটা আছে, যে synergyটা আছে, এটা আপনি নষ্ট করলে তো, most of the business are driven by 1 or 2 people. Now we don't want to disturb those 2 people's talents, but these talents will change. You see, if somebody is the managing director of a company, his son not necessarily will be the manager, his partner's son may become a managing director in the next generation. So এই জিনিসটা যেটা অন্যান্য সাইটে হয়েছে এটা হবে। প্লাস আমাদেরকে আমার মনে হয় খুব গ্রেটলি রিভার্স করতে হবে কিছু পলিসি। আমি যেটা বললাম যে কোম্পানিকে লিমিট করে দেয় গ্রোথ, উই শুড নাও স্টার্ট এনকারেজিং মার্জার্স। We have to make companies big, because all these compliances that we are talking about, you cannot have that compliance unless the company is big. So এখন যেটা করছে গভর্নমেন্ট বলতেছে যে এত শেয়ার হোল্ডিং গ্রুপ এটা হবে না, It is limiting a company's growth. EDF এ তুমি এটা করতে পারবে না, একটা বন্ডের মধ্যে 3টা ব্যাংকের থেকে 4টা ব্যাংক আসতে পারবে না। These are all structured around small companies. So we have to start thinking we are growing now. The garment industry was a cottage industry, it has now become a global industry and it is in everybody's focus now. So we have to stop thinking যে একটা ফ্যাক্টরির মধ্যে 3টা ব্যাংকের বেশি আসতে পারবে না। এখন যেটা নিয়ম আছে যে আপনি যদি না দেন তাহলে সে গ্রো করতে পারছে, সে আরেকটা ব্যাংক করতে পারছে, পেইড আপ ক্যাপিটাল আপনি 10 কোটি টাকার উপরে করতে পারবেন না। তার মানে এই জিনিসগুলোকে রিমুভ করে লেট দ্য কোম্পানিজ গ্রো, অ্যান্ড অ্যাজ দ্য কোম্পানিজ গ্রো দ্য কর্পোরেট গভর্নেন্স ইজ সামথিং দ্যাট উইল বিকাম mandatory on them, and we should also comply them to public-private companies. I don't know how, maybe beyond a certain turnover or a certain thing, so that all of us come into that thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. He raised a very vital question now, that is whether corporate governance or not corporate governance. I just like to share my ideas. The last week I rated a company, a spinning mill, had only 25,000 spindles at BBB+. And he was not agreeing with my report because he has seen some of his competitors have got A or A+. Then the question came about the another company, why you are raising A+ and what is my problem, because I am making profit and everything is okay. Why I am getting less rating? Then one of the point I raised is that it is a listed company and your one is not listed company. Then he told me, hold on a second, Mr. Ahmed. What matters to me? Because I am the 100% owner of this company, I can move as I like. I don't like to never in my life I will go for public. Never in my life, because I will be handicapped with so many things. I will be handcuffed with so many rules and regulations. I will never go. Please, you draw that point from your rating, because you are seeing my ability and willingness to pay the money. Go to my banker, he will ask how I am. So why you are giving mark for this corporate governance, this listed company, unlisted company? So this is now he is raising the question that when is the corporate governance is there, listed company is there, lot of rules and regulations are just slowing down the company's growth by many rules and regulations or corporate governance rules or the financial rules. So many things are now making the handicap. So now the total corporate governance itself is confused now on these things, particularly in the Bangladeshi sector, where I am also working to see that these corporate houses doing good or not. So this is the very important issue. I think the regulator should see. Mr. Arif, what do you think of this thing, that is a vital question, that corporate governance is there and slowing down the process?
I think it's a very pertinent question. Actually, when we were drafting the law, we have to always strike a right balance, that we shouldn't go too much regulation whereby the owners of the business are discouraged to come to the market. At the same time, it shouldn't be too liberal so that it doesn't work. So that's why when we prepared the first draft, we sent it out for public comments, and we got a lot of comments from listed companies and various other stakeholders. We have adjusted it. And I think it's a very, very valid point. I think this is a cycle goes on entire the world. You can see after Enron and WorldCom crash, in US Sarbanes-Oxley Act came in. And huge debate that whether Sarbanes-Oxley Act actually does favor for business or it controls business. So it's like when there is a crisis, more regulation. When there is more regulation, then slowly it goes down. So it's a cycle I think we'll go. And he said, we do not want business to be killed, because that is the ultimate purpose, that business has to be there, and we are all doing it for business. So I think we are very, very careful in doing so. In many other areas, there were opinion to be more stringent, but I personally, I was in charge of this project, so I was coming from the business sector, I was coming from the private sector, I worked in 22 years in private sector, so I thought that in no way business can be hampered. I'm sure Mr. Mamun Rashid can give
yes,
more.
Please, Mr. Mamun Rashid.
I 100% endorse Mr. Chaudhary's views, and in fact he shared this with his very bitter experience with Rohim Textile, that how the small shareholders are behaving, rowdy behavior, not allowing the CEO to talk, constant trying to divert attention towards food being served in the AGM and all these things. We are aware of it, but this is the only journey all the economies have gone through and made through. So we can talk about the timing side of it. Even to answer Mr. Chaudhary, for the interest of time, I have to be very brief, I know, that yes, and that is where you have to bank on the independent directors, how to tackle regulators, I'm not talking about handling, tackle the regulators, other multifaceted challenges from the small shareholders, minority shareholders, even migration of best practices. That is why small companies also should invite the professionals to sit. Maybe if the fees cannot be increased, they can, like the US companies, they can think of granting share option so that link to the company's performance. If the company performance is increasing or improving, that can be a percentage of the share option can be made encashable. So that can be, and SEC can think of it, or some other regulators can think of it. Now coming to, I have been really encouraged by Mr. Chaudhary today to be very frank and candid. I was the independent director of a large commercial bank, second generation commercial bank. And while they invited me, they wanted me, of course, looking at my 25 plus years, 26 years working home and abroad in many emerging market countries. I'm a very fortunate Bangladeshi, I would say. God has made me so that yes, I could work in more than 30 countries, either auditing or working directly. So they invited me, and it was a very warm invitation. They wanted me to fix their credit policy, their security collateral review, help the task force to write a risk management policy, corporate governance improvement. So it was all nice and in keeping with my core competence that I have gained over last 26 years working in 3 continents of the world for 3 global corporations. And then comes almost all the directors are 60 plus, almost nearing 70. Their second generation is yet to be made encouraged to join and play a role. They don't want to come to Moti Jail, bank head office, taking a journey of tour of 2 hours to get in and 3 hours to get out to the home. So, and we were made ditto representative of this old bank sponsored directors. So I became, and since I was a banker, so they wanted to engage me afterwards in micromanagement. So Mamun bhai, can you see it security thik ache kina, covenant monitoring hocche kina? So I became a barrier towards the independence of the management. Since I come from a very flamboyant background, when I speak about security and collateral, the MD or DMDs, they develop a hostility against me. So again, owner's representative. So I was independent, but I became, take it or leave it, I became owner's representative. This is one. Number 2, since I also write and do some independent research for the global companies and for my own company, so I independently also comment. And that is not liked by the regulators also. So they want to pinch me through my board, who are literally the business people. So they have got so many other pressure from the regulators. So, and they were very nervous with me. They invited me, and then again, regulators they don't like me because I'm also writing in Financial Express, Daily Star, commenting on their own governance model. This is number 2. That is why now, just few weeks back, when a 3rd generation meant to be a good, well-governed bank invited me chairman to become another independent director. I resigned from that 2nd generation bank for obvious reason. You can read between the lines. So now I wanted to know that yes, he thought I will jump into this proposition. Oh, director, gari pathiye dibo kina sir, kibabe apni asben. There are other facilities, beyond 5,000 taka. And to my utter surprise, I found out the director etar upore thrive korche. Je boro ekta banker director, আত্মীয় স্বজনকে বলবো চাকরি দিয়ে দিব, এটার সুযোগ for a retired government servant or maybe a senior university teacher. This may be the incentive, the pseudo incentives. But আমি যখন দেখলাম যে আমি what value do I add? What you expect me to do? And that gentleman was very, very shocked, in fact, surprised. যে মামুন সাহেব, আপনাকে আমরা অফার দিয়েছি, this should be enough. There is a long queue to become independent director. So I thought, unless I'm convinced what is the role you expect out of me, then I cannot become a director. So এগুলো হচ্ছে নির্মম বাস্তবতা। অফকোর্স আমরা চাই গভর্নেন্স ইমপ্রুভ করতে, এবং যেমনটি আমরা ওই প্রবলেমটাও চাই না, অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম আমরা একটা পরিবেশ চাওয়াটা বোধহয় আমাদের জন্য বাতুলতা হবে না, যে আমরা যাতে আসলেও সাকসেস ট্রান্সফার করতে পারি। যে আফ্রিকার সাকসেস ট্রান্সফার, আই হ্যাভ ওয়ার্কড ইন ইন্ডিয়া, আই হ্যাভ ওয়ার্কড ইন সিঙ্গাপুর, আই হ্যাভ অডিটেড almost all the countries in Asia, in Africa, and some of the countries in Europe. So how do I contribute to this nation building? একদিকে হচ্ছে রেগুলেটরদের সাথে কনফ্লিক্ট, আর রেগুলেটরস ক্যান ক্রিয়েট সিরিয়াস pressure on the so-called businessman sponsor directors. So I became almost a persona non grata without any role clarity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Now,
Can I take the opportunity of saying so? The question that you
and
raised.
I'm asking one question.
Can I answer that? Can
Now,
I add
I'm
some-
coming to you. I'm coming to it. First of all, you give me the reaction on this very vital issue raised by our Chaudhary, that corporate governance is slowing down the process. Number one. Number two, then you can reply. You can react on his question. Thank you.
Okay, so beginning to questions, the experience that we are sharing is financial institutions. It's a public institution, that's why it is much more regulated. As compared to other manufacturing, where there is no primary regulator, naturally there is the bunch of regulation might affect in one form or other in the industry growth. Now the question is, what I would like to say, you need to accept when a company become listed and become publicly held from the closely held company, it has become a public interest is at stake. That's why it needs to be regulated. And that regulation comes from, so one needs to accept when I'm going into listed, that means the firm is going to be listed, that one is to accept the benefit outweigh the cost of compliance, then only then they will be interested or encouraged to become listed in the market or going public. Now the question is, the issue, the big companies may not interested to come in here because the benefit we see in, which I raised already, the benefit usually the tax payments in terms of tax rate exemption that one will enjoy outweigh the cost with the compliance, cost that they have to comply. But the benefit that can be managed privately, nobody feel encouraged to come to the market to be listed. This is one. Okay, for growing large, you raise fund from the market, still bank-based dominance are there. Naturally, some may grow with the funds they can raise from the bank and financial institution. So that's just giving you an idea. Telecom company, Grameenphone came into the market when they are requested to offload 10%, only they will have a 10% reduction in the enjoyment of tax from 45 to 35. That saved from the year when they are listed 600 crores taka of saving of tax. That has gone up to 2,000 crore taka. So think about, since the multinational organization may be not in a position to avoid the tax, I will say to evade the tax, so they feel it encouraging to come to the market by saving that part. That one needs to be understood. Then from a perspective when you were saying in a banks or non-bank financial institutions, these are more public oriented, because funds of these institutions are the deposits. That's a public interest at large. That's why they are much more regulated, even because they have a primary regulator. And in that fashion, I would like to share some of the things. Like when you see, you have the independent director, now became the chairman of the audit committee, because I'm also chairman of the audit committee, and getting myself engaged in every affairs they would like to, by thinking that in a further arrangement of 5,000 taka allowance, forget about that thing. In many cases, getting subordinate bonds issues, and all these features, we have 3 days sitting without any honorarium, just I'm saying, because I feel obligated to do my role, and I've become accountable to Bangladesh Bank, because Bangladesh Bank primary regulation made accountable in certain aspect of the chairman of the audit committee beside the regulation given in that. So in that cases, maybe compensation desserts, as compared to manufacturing. I would rather say don't be put in the same lane, that is the thing, And there are more issues, now Risk Management Committee has been formed. They have been represented to Risk Management Committee. Turning to the subsidiary, merchant securities, then you have to play a role, take into consideration on negative equity issues, margin loss, how it can be written off, what for rescheduling, is the first rescheduling, second rescheduling. But these are a lot of issues independent director can play the role.
Before I go to my audiences for questions, I would now ask our past president, Mr. Mumtazuddin Ahmad, Professor. He is working in several organizations as independent directors. How do you feel as the role of independent? Do you feel really independent as the question coming up now? Would you please...
Okay. Thank you for giving me the floor. I was the independent director of Alas Textile Mill for the last 7 years. When I am appointed as the independent director of Chittagong Stock Exchange, then I resigned from this post of independent director of Alas Textile Mill. Yes, the point is clear that who will be an independent director? Yes, I have the quality that is the assigned or fixed up by the Securities Exchange Commission, but the chairman of the Alas Textile Mill is personally known to me. So he offered me whether I am interested to act as an independent director. Second, the question answer is clear. If you have no connections before, you may not be an independent director. How much quality you have or how much independent you have. And I find the most of the directors are from the family members. So sometimes I feel some problems to act as an independent. So as a chairman of the audit committee, I have to say some financial matters. But if it goes against their interest, their benefit, they are not interested to take my point. For example, 2 years back, perhaps 2 years back, as per Bangladesh accounting standard, we have to charge depreciation for the whole years. But Alas Textile Mill charges depreciation for a segment of period because the factory becomes shut down. It is a violation of the International Accounting Standards. It is adopted by our ICAB. Then Securities Exchange Commission fined all the directors, including me, for violation of this standard. But I repeatedly pointed that it is not the law. But chairman argued that I shut down the factory. Why I charge the depreciation? They do not bother the international regulation. Because this is the real problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mumtaz, for giving something very new, which normally it is flowing in the floor, but it's not coming to us. But the important things are coming up. Serving the mustard is not the role of independent directors. Then again, question is coming up now. The independent director should be appointed by the minority shareholders, as the question came up now. So these are the things, issues. So before I ask Mr. Mohiuddin about whether we shall, now it is fixed up that you cannot be more than, independent director more than 3 companies. Whether if the people like Usman or like Abdul Motun Chowdhury or Mohiuddin or others to take into one, how many people, whether you will open it, more than 3 organizations or not, that is the question. What do you think, Mr. Mohiuddin?
I've got different perspectives regarding these independent directorships. It looks like that we are trying to say that independent directorship is a profession. But I don't think independent directorship at the current context of Bangladesh economy is not a profession, it is a voluntary service, it is a social service from a rare skilled people as available in Bangladesh. There are a lot of skilled people, they are no more in Bangladesh, they are not interested to coming in Bangladesh, but still there is some good people staying in Bangladesh, they want balanced development of the country, not a development, balanced development so that, so that there is no abnormal tension with the development. As Mr. Chowdhury says that Mr. X and Y, they are doing very fine, but they are not discharging their social responsibility. I cannot start an industry, Mr. X cannot start an industry, By this concept of listed company is one of those to share your knowledge, your expertise, your well, to some extent, the small investors, I should say.